You're talking about 3101?
Yeah.
Like,
Do you
I
have
would say
one
like,
that I could buy off?
no, I did not with like,
I'm not
it's $30.
Really?
They're not like those are like 150.
Yeah.
They're like 30. But if you use
Well, I would, but I don't even like
it's like present value.
Yeah. You have a special button.
Yeah, so like your calculator, you plug in like all the numbers.
on CDC
Future value. 7 for the interest rate. Say it says like solve for a number of years. You put in like all the other ones, and you put like add, and it would give you the number to use.
Because I was
Because it probably gives you like
No, it makes you like, it makes you like, when you're in the club.
yeah, exactly.
calculator.
No, and I was
I
like,
know.
Yeah, the calculator does it for you.
Not like, oh, I'm sick cough. Like, I know what a COVID cough is like.
the tests were hard though.
What's your
And I
major?
it's like sick. You're not loving your legs going crazy.
You have a teacher.
Like it's online. It's like
I
some.
first this guy was
Some lady. Her name's Kathleen Bailey.
Exactly, like she was being so sassy, and then like when she started coughing, like kind of so bad.
I mean, yeah, it's just
She
home.
left it down.
Just have to do. I'm gonna have to do one in person.
That's what was working.
Like it's asynchronous, and they come in like for 3 different tests throughout the whole semester.
This does not only refer to physical things.
Yeah, I guess so. Thank you.
We're also talking about it in office setting, which again, this is basically like a service layout. So the most important thing that you're looking for with the layout is that it meets the company's competitive requirements. It's going to be effective and efficient. So that's what you're looking for if this would be on a quiz or just in life in general, that when you're developing your layout strategy, there are other things that are important. We'll talk about this here in consideration. Next slide. But what's really important is that you're meeting the competitive requirements. That's the most important aspect. Because you don't just rearrange things just for fun. You can consider different things like utilization, usage on different equipment, space, and people. Flow of information, this is important for people. If there are people who need to communicate regularly, do you put them on opposite sides of the building, or in some places opposite parts of the country? Or you have them all co-located, have them all located in one spot. Of course, morale is important and safety. Customer interaction is important also, and then flexibility. Especially in the modern times now where there's a lot of things like hot desking where nobody has a set desk. You move around to different spots. A friend of mine is a senior director for S&P 500, and even though he was a director, he sat in a whole bunch of cubicle areas along with his employees. The whole idea is that, you know, he had to move around. They did a lot of moving around. So it's just easy to pick up your stuff from the desk, not have to move offices. And the only offices were for people who were like HR and had to deal with employees. And the conference rooms. You figure if you needed to do anything, you had the conference room available. So on this, what's really important is thinking about aesthetics. And that's important because people are going to be spending, you figure 8, 9 hours a day, sometimes more in a facility. The nicer you make it look, the more, morale can help morale in a situation like that. So don't forget about the environment, temperature. Color of the wall is important. They've done studies where people complain about the cafeteria being too cold. And the color of the walls is like a white, kind of a sterile color. So they made it a warmer, reddish type color. And employees started commenting how much warmer the cafeteria was. The catch is they did not change the temperature at all, just the color of the wall. So this is the difference. When you're looking at different environments, on this side is your big box store. You go there to get things cheap. On this side is a Hard Rock Cafe or a place where you go for an experience. And an experience, you're going to design the layout differently. You can design it so people interact with the material a lot differently than a box store. Box store is the big one, the discount store here, called big box stores, it's just big boxes, that looks like a big box. You may want people to wander around and try to find something, so they bump into more things. They may put things in the back left corner you don't want people to see, or that people are looking for, both want to see, versus an attraction, they put the things you want to people to see up front, so you draw people into the area. So you're doing layouts, think about what you're doing, why you're doing it. What competitive advantage is it giving you? The big box store competitive advantage is it's cheap. The other side is expensive, but you're creating an experience. We're going to talk about all these layouts. And being able to identify them in life is important. So you understand what type of layout you're working with. You walk into it. Just some real examples. Let's talk about office space. This is basically where you think about your office, where people sit and they do work. They have to, a lot of, most of them, I said, almost guaranteed to have a computer of some sort. Biggest problem here is when you start thinking about where do you locate people. When I worked at Electric Boat, they had 3 locations, now there's 4. You had the shipyard, they actually put things together. The submarines were there, they put things together. You had the design area, which is across this is brought into London. You had design people on the other side of the river. So they weren't even the same location. Then you had the materials management and purchasing where it was in a separate facility. So they broke it out like that. And that's one way to do it, is you put everybody the same height together because you're talking to everybody the same height. Another way to do it would be to, instead of breaking them all up by function, if you had the finance people were in one location, and the program officer were in another. So to go visit these programs, the finance people, I had to get on a bus that took 45-minute transit. By the time I left my desk, by the time I got there. So an hour and a half in transit is a lot of time just for a half-hour meeting. So what you could do is say, okay, so all people work on one project or one specific product or service sit in the same areas. You have all the different functions in one area, so you don't have to walk as far to see things. Disadvantage of that is that you have the functional people separated potentially from their supervisors and bosses. So that makes them a little more thus connected to their functional manager. In retail, this is pretty straightforward. Everybody's been in the store at some point in their life. And for this, they're really trying to expose customers to the higher margin products, the products that you want to sell. So that means like places like Walmart charge extra shelving fees for an end cap, something that's on the end. The things that are high level are given a premium space. And things that you put in the back of the store could be things like milk and basic products that people are going to go in every time for. So to get milk, you got to walk all the way through the store. The hope is that you buy something on impulse. Warehouse. This is, we were talking a little bit about this before, but storage. So for this, you can't just put things next to each other, especially in chemical. I did chemical safety where there's this company that put chemicals that should not be together. You put a liquid that could leak or drip if it's broken over top of something that can react with. And if you do something like that, the EPA will come and give you fines. And this other place, this other company I worked for, the storage area was about the size of from this wall over to here, where I'm standing. About over here. So that was their warehouse, their storage space. So for that company, I think you couldn't buy a lot of stuff and just have it laying around. You had to move product through really fast. So depending on the scenario, you may have a lot or limited. So you think about the supply chain activity that you did. Who should have the most material? Well, probably not a store, especially if it's in New York City. For those of you who live in cities environments, you're like, well, the store shouldn't have it because there's not a lot of room. But if you're in Iowa, someplace that has a lot more space, or someplace in the Midwest where I grew up in Ohio, the the store, it's cheaper, land is cheaper, so you can store more things in the store. So the question is, well, where do you put materials? Where's it cheapest to put them? So fixed position, this is for a project. You think about a submarine, you can't move the submarine around to different spots to get it worked on. You have to bring the material to it. A house is another example. If you're going to build a house, you're going to bring things to your traditional house. So then a job shop, which is process oriented, you start thinking about some of the things you did with the Harley Davidson example from last week, the process strategy. So for this, there's assembly areas. So you design the factory or the layout so you have similar areas working together. And this is similar to what I was talking about for the office space. So electric boats, they actually stay at the shipyard in New London, that's in Connecticut, or Groton, Connecticut, actually puts things together. They don't assemble the cylinders. They don't put a lot of the material together. That's actually done in Quonset Point, Rhode Island. And there, if you go into their facility there, you've got electrical over here, you've got welding over here, and you have other components, mechanical components over there. So it's done by job shops with different processes. We have a work cell. So for this, you have a similar product, everybody works on together. So for this, if you think about the food production, you see the example. So for this, allergens are a big, important consideration. Because you don't want people who are allergic to peanuts or gluten or things like that being in contact with the product. So you have separate areas of allergens. So when you're working with allergens, you work in that area, or you separate food that's going to be allergy-free into different areas. So this is what works out for product families, or similar things that are together. Then this one right here is what everybody can think of. This is the How It's Made show. You watch that, they're always showing like assembly lines and things on roller cables. But for this, it's a production line. So I've been to Gordon Seafood, I've seen where they make all the fish patties for McDonald's. You know, it's a big production line where they do that. And the idea is they want the minimal amount of handling. Someplace like Necco, New England Confectionery Company, they make all the sweetheart, those hearts for Valentine's Day, all those little hard candy things. So they make that there, and a lot of like floral fashion type candy. So if you're working for assembly line process. So those are words, let's put pictures to this stuff. So this is your traditional office, and this looks like a newspaper office from, it's in black and white from maybe the 50s or 60s. But what you'll notice is that this is just a bunch of people piled into a room. And how do you can't really tell, in this, you can't really tell who's the boss. You see there's a sign here, in the bottom part here, that says city editor. So maybe that person's more important. But the whole idea is you've got everybody together, maybe this person stays the head of it and oversee what's going on. So now you have your traditional cubicles, and this is what most of the cubicles are going to look like in companies you go to. But what's interesting about this is if you're familiar with office settings, you can tell who's the most important person here, or most important people. How many people, you don't have to tell me yes or no, but how many people here have been in a setting like this where they can identify what all the different tasks and importance all those people are? How many people? A few people have been in office. So, how do you know? It's easy. How tall are the walls? So if you go, on your first job, you'll walk into more often than not, a cubicle setting like this. And you'll have to figure out who's important, who you talk to for what. And here's a little breakdown of how to figure this out. First of all, meeting and conference rooms are almost always outside and you have clear windows. Because you need to see who's in the conference room that's available. It's just something to do. It helps it become add a little more light to it. The most important people are along the walls. They usually have their own offices or cubicles that go all the way to the ceiling. Or there's one boss I know of who was annoyed, who was very mad. He kept fighting for this. He was a very important manager, And every other manager had cubicles, the cubicle walls went to the ceiling. This person, cubicle walls were about a foot short of the ceiling. And this person was annoyed constantly that his cubicle walls did not go to the ceiling. All the other managers the same rank, cubicle walls went to the ceiling. So yes, it does matter to some people. Then, if you have in here, you can see the managers out here, they usually have a bigger cube. That if they have an office or cubicle, they have a table in there. So people come to that person for meetings. Down here, this is more administrative staff. The reason you know that is because the cubicle walls are lower, and these are people that the other people need to randomly stop by to talk to. So if you don't walk into a job interview, potentially a live view, you walk in like, where do I go? Sometimes you get confusing. Look for the low cubicle wall. That's going to be an administrative type person, somebody whose job is to more communicate and see what's going on. So in a setting like this, you can see these people here can look around and see what's going on and help. It also could be lower level people. So in here, you're going to have most of the business workers. That's a traditional height of cube wall. I think they're about like 5.5 feet or something, maybe 6 feet tall. I can keep over them.
It's like an 84.
Then in this area is an open area. You can see this is where a lot of paper processing.
Why did you say
It's an open area like this, there's a lot of paperwork is done here. And maybe I'm guessing that these people, because they're right next to it, maybe they need to access it. It may not be true because there's a floor over here, but the whole proximity to that paperwork. Kind of implies that the people down here are doing more work on that paperwork. And somebody over here would have to walk all the way through. When you look at an office, start dissecting and thinking about what's going on. The level of cubicle walls, the number of people in a cubicle also indicates the importance of people. And if there's more people, if there's a lot of people in a cubicle or in a space, then it's possible, especially when you get into like a Google or a computer technology type company, that they do a lot of groups and teams, and so they'll put all the people together for a project. Then once that project's done, they dissolve the project, everybody goes somewhere else, and then you'll join another team in another cubicle. That way you have that close proximity, you can just sit around and talk to someone. And I can tell you, it helps a lot when you do that, because you're able to sit there and just maybe chill, hey, Steven, I forget what the heck's going on here, can you help me? And he's literally like 3 feet away from you. Or pop your head up over the cubicle wall and say, hey, got a minute? So height and location and all this stuff really helps with the communication. And this is a more modern example. This is what, hopefully your project, this is more like if you're going to be travelers, companies that are a little more progressive with the layout are going to be like this. And what this is showing is, you can see it's much brighter, obviously, with the lighter, lower walls. But you can see here, again, we have people up here who don't have walls. And it looks like these workstations do a lot of paper processing over here. Then you have these areas here, where this picture shows how people can come over and communicate and work with someone who's got his own desk. And what I like about this one, the reason I chose this picture, you can see here, this person has chosen to remove this window, open the window, or do whatever, so that she can see into this office over here. So it's more likely that because this is gone, these two people either like to talk to each other or have to talk to each other a lot. And again, you can see back here, conference rooms, and I bet you this looks, there's a boss's or some higher level person's office is gonna be along the wall somewhere down there. So again, if you ever get to be in charge, think about the height of the cubicle and how it helps communication. Obviously think about light. This is very dreary. I've been in buildings like this, and it's a very sterile environment. One of the buildings I didn't work in, but I visited, was an old grocery store that they turned into an office. So it didn't have a lot of light, natural light in there, and it was a different feeling than when I worked in places like this with lower cubicle walls that felt much brighter. So pay attention. This is a great how do you determine, looking at all of this, especially this mess here, like, how do you know where to put people? It does not come down to, well, you should not choose the random assignment. A lot of times, newer people get put into cubicles that aren't being used, and then they get filtered in to the mess, but you shouldn't be a random. So what you do is, you make a list of all the departments that you have to work with. And then you think of a code on your right-hand side. The code here, this is one way to work this out. This is just a book example of the terminology. If you do something on this owner unit company and you want to suggest this, you can use this as a starting point. People say like, hold on, I don't understand what the I means. Why don't we just say this? Then change it, adapt. That's where the tools you learn in school aren't necessarily going to use directly in your job, but you can use them as analogies, as starting points. That's the biggest thing. I teach this in project management all the time. Well, I give you these sort of things, adapt them, use them as starting points. If you try to force people into the vocabulary on something like this, then it really makes the process bog down, get slower, and it starts people saying, well, I don't want to use this. So whatever you have to do to things like this is just throughout the course and throughout your college career, whatever you have to do to modify it to make people happy or make it better and understand a better communication tool, just do it. Make it your own, adapt it. So what you do is a relationship chart. So where all people go, you make on the left-hand side, you have the places where people can go, and you have a closeness. Absolutely necessary. These two people need to be next to each other. Usually supervisors want to be absolutely close to everyone they supervise. Especially important, ordinary okay, unimportant, and then at the bottom is not desirable. You probably don't want the lounge area near something like social media relations. Because you have important people coming in, you probably don't want them near the lounge or all people talking being very informal or casual. So let's look at how you can do this. So we talk about the different areas, and we cite, and then we say, we have an area, we start the first line here. So we have a production office. So when you think about the production department and the office, how close do they need to be? The code is, it's okay. You go to production, the stock room, there's an A there, which means it's absolutely necessary. Go look at the second line now. And you go through every single one of these. And assign a code to it. And then you use this relationship diagram like this. So if you want to know where the locker room and offices should be located, you notice down here, I just took this from the table we just did. The offices, the locker room is X, which means undesirable. Look up here on the line. So you follow offices, follow down over here to where it intersects with locker room. And you put an X there. That makes sense. You can just this is a good question. This is not a physical location. This is an abstract Excel chart. Good. No, it's not. It's an abstract chart. It's not a physical location. Anyway. So what you're saying here is you're putting this X here to indicate that when we're putting this together, these two should not be near each other. And then you do the same thing. And you can do this, I have this again, you notice the banner here. You can go through here and practice this on your own. I give you the answer key. And how do you use this? Well, when you're looking at production, you say, okay, let's start with production and put it there. This is the sort of things you do with temporary post-it note type things you can pick up and move, or note cards. You can put on a table, or you can put on a PowerPoint in a reading room, something like that. And you look at production. You just put production somewhere, you say, okay, so production needs and you put the things important, so it absolutely needs to be scanned to the stock room, and absolutely next to the tool room. So you put production tool room there, then you go to the offices, and offices should be near some things that maybe you can't quite figure out exactly where to go, but you know shipping, the offices should not be next to the locker room. Maybe put the offices in one corner, and then put the locker room in the other. And you just go through, it's an iterative process. You go through it until you get something that looks good according to this layout. That makes sense. So for retail layout, it's all about profitability per square foot. And customer exposure. So that's the idea of the layout is you want it to be good for customers. And this is where I talked about the layout. One of the things you'll notice in most stores is they do not have the seafood counter right by the door. Because for most people, seafood is not the first thing they want to smell when they walk into a grocery store. So that's the sort of experience you're thinking of. Think about every one of your senses. That'd be a good quiz question. When you design your layout, put yourself physically in that space with every single one of your senses. What would you hear? When you walk into a grocery store, what do you want to hear? You want to hear people complaining? You want to put the customer complaints right up front? Maybe you do because that's easy to do quickly you return. So maybe you want to do it far enough away from the door so people don't hear when they walk in. What do you smell? Hopefully you're not tasting anything. But if, licking the floor or whatever. But taste and smell go together. You kind of think of those together. Maybe you do want them to taste something. You put the deli right up front with your new special, give them a tasting. So think about all of those senses, and that's where you put things that you know people want easy access to. Maybe you want something like chips and stuff in the candy counter really close. You know, people come in for candy aren't going to buy milk or buy anything else. They're just there for one thing. They come in. And then in the back, you put a lot of the things that people in the area will always go back here. So I'm not, this class marketing will help you a lot more with this sort of thing, but this is just a layout. This is one place where when operations is going to match up with marketing, you have to figure out how they'll do a layout. One classic marketing thing is peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are American. When you're a kid, almost everyone, at least I know of, at some point has something like a peanut butter sandwich, which is made of bread, peanut butter, and jelly. So the classic marketing question is, for layouts, for production people is, where do we want to put all those through the period? Do you put peanut butter over here, jelly over here, and bread over here, so it forces people to walk through the store? Or do you put all three of them right next to each other so it's convenient for the customer? And the answer to that is whichever one makes the most money, fundamentally. Your business. And don't forget that making most money, happy customers make a lot of money. Think about this. In this case, the haircut. When someone comes to get a haircut, that's not a $30 or $100 transaction. Maybe more depending on what you get done. That's about a $10,000 to $20,000 transaction. Because that customer is going to keep, if you give good service, that customer can come back for the rest of their life. My wife's stepfather has been going to the same place for 60 years now. So that initial, say $2 haircut has turned into thousands of dollars. And if that first haircut has been bad, that first customer interaction has been terrible, you could have just lost, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000 or whatever for 60 years worth of haircuts. So when I say profit is important, that's a component of it. Happy customers. All right, enough of that. The warehouse. We handle cost in warehouse space. So everybody, you should, for a warehouse to be most efficient, put everything right by the door so nobody has to walk anywhere for it. The problem is that if you put everything next to the door, then nobody can move anywhere. Kind of like if you ever watched The Simpsons, there's one time Mr. Burns gets sick, and he has everything. He gets every disease. The reason he's not dead is because all the diseases are fighting against each other. Random. Anyway, so handling costs. How long does it take to move something versus the cost of warehouse space? And think about it as a cube, you're thinking about up, down, left, right, 3 dimensions. And obviously you don't want to put things like mothballs and cleaning chemicals that have a strong odor to them next to things like bread and food, which are going to absorb those odors. This is important. This is called cross-docking. This is what you'd ideally like to do. So this is an ideal situation where your truck comes in, immediately the material that's there gets shipped across the other side of the warehouse to the outbound. It's not stored anywhere. We can get better at it using, as it says here, it requires tight scheduling, but if you're using electronic tracking, you can get pretty close to it. And obviously with the supply chain issues, if the inbound gets delayed at all, then the outbound has to wait or take something else. For cross-docking, this is the idea that, as it says there, that nothing is placed in storage. As soon as the truck gets there, it's moved into the other truck. And it's an idealized scenario. Anyway, bullets are straight to this. So for fixed position, this is easy to explain. You have something big that you can't move through an assembly process. You can't move to different facilities, either because of physics, physics does not allow you to move a house around the different lumber yards to get different materials. You have the lumber yards to deliver all the materials to one place. Biggest problem is there's limited space. This is a picture on the left-hand side. These are from the military public site, so there's nothing top secret here. This is the graving dock for electric boat. If you look to the left and right, there's an orange lift you may be able to see if you zoom in on your computer. And you have to maneuver, I had to, at one point in my life, maneuver that inside of all that small space. That space is no more than 10 feet. No wider than like me, so that from about here to that wall. About the amount of space that you have to operate a piece of equipment that's about 10 feet. You try to maneuver in a 12-foot space or a 14-foot space or something that's about 10 feet. And even with houses, you have the same problem. You've got to get things there. You've got to get to the top. It's getting material to the product. This is one that's very common. You put equipment that's similar together. You put your wood cutting in one area, you put the electrical in the other, and then you put the piping in another area. So if you think of like a house that you're building. And the reason you do that is because you've got light things together and it's easy to keep track of what's going on. You've got all the people that are similar thinkers together. If you have a problem, you can just turn around simply and say, hey, George, I know you've done this a lot. Help me. So this is an example of it. You have different locations, different things that are located, and you create a map for how something flows through. This is what a real image is going to look like if you do this properly. And there's software that you can do this on or use to create this. But you have the red line up the right. You can see this is when receiving product comes in. It's moved onto a cart. It's ground. This goes to the grinder, the mill. Then it goes over here. Or it could skip that and go over here. Then it goes to the burr. It may not need to go to this area over here. It goes to here, then it goes out. So with the process layout, it's nice because the process, the word is process, and each step, a process is done on. Think about this as a value, this is a visual image of a value stream. Well, we're moving something here. Where's the value created? At each one of these process steps. And keep in mind that in between each one of these, many times there's a shelf or a bin for storage until it can be worked on in the third step, or the next step. So we're going to talk about using CellOM several times in this chapter. So for the process layout, the idea is you want to minimize the movements. And here's one assumption, write this down so when you're working on problems. The assumption with these is very simple. Is that we're assuming that you move from the center, that it's going to be rectangular or square, and that you're moving from the center of one to the center of another when you're doing this. So kind of think about the center being the average. And you are never going diagonally. This is the sort of example to gives you an idea, gets you started, gets you introduced to this idea. It's not the most realistic, but there are ways you can adapt it to make it more realistic. We're assuming that the distance is going to be 20 feet. If this is a 20 foot or 20 feet between the two. And if it's 60 feet across, 40 feet, so 20 feet into the middle. What you would do to get the distances in reality is you would just walk it with they've got floor devices or something, a wheel on the floor that counts the distance. Or if you have a shop wheel like this, you can just do a rough estimate with a ruler or something like that. But we're always going left to right or up or down, never diagonally. The assumption is moving from the center square of each. So what we have in each one of these then is each one of the departments. And here's the type of question we're going to work through. So you have a 60 by 40 facility divided into 6 equal sections. The loads per week movement chart below. Assume the cost to move each is $3. This assumption, in reality, what you would do is calculate how much it costs per foot. If you're using forklift, you're going to think about time, operator time, and maintenance or repair on that forklift. You'll throw that together. Your finance people or accountants will give you an average cost per foot. As the operations person, you can do that math, but in larger companies, the finance people can do that easier and faster, and it's also their job usually, so do what they're supposed to do. Yeah, do what they're supposed to do. So, what's the optimal arrangement of rooms, and what is the expected cost? So this is important that you understand that when you're talking about the loads, you have assembly to paint. You have assembly to paint, 75 loads go back and forth between them. And notice that we don't repeat anything. There's no paint to assembly. So as you go through this, you make sure that all of these are unique. And to do this, if you want to follow Excel limb, you can. If not, as you've noticed, I have this in the videos. And so you're going to go to Excel limb, to the layout, chapter 9. The layout, you're going to choose the number of departments going to be 6. I can tell you that for the homework, 6 departments is the most common. It's nice, easy number to work with. You can name it department, you use A, whatever you want to, and then you're going to click OK. And this sheet is going to pop up. Now it's not going to have numbers in it. I put the numbers preloaded to save time. reason you're entering 22 or 80, you made a mistake. So a problem like this is only three options. You can see 20, 40, 20, 40, 60, and you fill this in. And the cost of movement is $3. This warning right here is telling you that this does not equal that. I'll talk about that in a second. So what you have right now is you have a total movement of 14,000. Again, you can go down here and look at this if you want, but I never asked you to. You're always just going to use material here to interpret. So the total movement is 14,600. That's how many movements there are. The total cost is very simple. It's the movements times the cost per movement. This is important for the quiz. There will be two basic questions that we ask. And there will be two, based on those, there will be two options. You'll ask what it is the initial or unoptimized total movements or total cost. So this is the initial, the unoptimized. Read the question carefully. To ask for total movement or total cost. Those are almost always the only two questions. You have to determine whether it's the initial, is the question asked the initial, or for the ideal setup or the solved one. So how you get to this is you start with this one and you click these buttons. Now here's something important. These are in the wrong order. You click this one first, and all this does is it makes the bottom table right down here. It mirrors that. Because the computer needs that to do the math. You don't need to do that up here. It saves time. Another tip for the quiz, to save time. You do not need to enter any data on the mirror side up here. You get this down here, you just click that. The minimum load distance, you click on this, and it'll run some iterations. You'll see down here, it'll run through a lot of iterations. And it'll optimize this and tell you what the best combination is based off of what your number is. So if you get total movement of 11,460, at $3 is 34,380. So the optimized for the small answer is the other option. And it's going to be total movement or total cost. How all of this works up here, the math behind it, don't worry about that. All I need to know is how to enter the data up here, how to enter the data down here, and how to set click then click that. Interpret the charts, and you're done. And you have this example here, and you'll note that this is the initial setup. You can see assembly, machine, testing, painting, receiving, and shipping. So 5 of the 6 movements. And you can see here that room 4 initially was paint. Room 4 is still paint. So it moves around as to what the optimal movement. So, for work cells, this is where you have people together. You have things like this, where you have people working in a similar area. And what you want to minimize is movement. This is when you think back to those early people, Frank Gilbreth. He was a study, one of the seminal people that said, let's minimize movement. So it takes 2 people working like this to actually do a lot of turning around. You can see here that they got 3 things to turn around. Now if you put in a semicircle, they do less movement. And ideally, you have these 2 people can see each other in the corner of their eye. If this person gets a little behind, this person has some time to help. This person can simply walk over here to help. So you can optimize, you can cross train to do 2 different things. You have things in a line like this. Here, this isn't just, again, this is one situation that could happen. It could be possible if you take what used to require 4 people and only move it down to 3. you optimize or minimize the amount of motion that are needed. Again, it may reduce movement. So when you think about layouts for employees, even office workers, think about how you put papers together. You got people on table. You're going to assemble a marketing report. Been there, done that. You put it in a long line. You just take one of each and just walk down the line and put one together. You put it in a U shape, you actually save more time. Because then you can just walk in a circle. You just have to walk all the way back to the end. Which doesn't seem like a lot until you realize that you've got 200 customers, you have to put together 200 of these. So inspections, you can see something like this, you can see each other what's going on. This person down here doesn't really have much idea what's going on down here. But when you're down here, you can just simply look to the right and see what's going on. Fewer workers potentially. These are potential, again, reach more of the work area, more balance, and communication is likely better. This is a classic, we start getting to this next part, is a classic part of operations called tact time. And what you want to do is you want to see if you can meet the customer's demand. So what's the total work at the time that's available, units needed. So it's going to give you a unit of time over quantity, over units. Then the workers required is the operational time required and the tact time. So let's look at that in an example. So staffing workshops, you have 600 meters per day required, roughly 8 days. Operation required 140. This over here is nice, you can see sometimes doesn't help you with the problem. This is the sort of thing you may see on a production report. So you pull out from this information, 600 meters per day required, and it's scheduled for 8 hours per day. So the tact time is the pace of production to meet customer demand. That should probably be highlighted in yellow. But highlight that if you have the slide printed out or write it down. That'd be a great question for an exam. So for a quiz, I say exam, I mean quiz too. So tact time means you have to produce every 48 seconds you have to produce 1 unit. If you get confused on these problems, for those who have chemistry, that's balancing all those units out, just put what units you need and just start subtracting and adding, just like chemistry. So you need 48 seconds for each unit. So to meet that operational time, you know that you need 2.9 workers. This is one place where operations is going to defy any of your usual habit with math. With math, you cannot, after this, you always round up. If this number comes out as 2.3, you don't round down. You have to round up because you don't have 0.3 workers. Or you have to round up because you need more than 1 worker for that. You can't have 2.9. There's no such thing as 0.9 workers. Unless maybe he doesn't have a leg or something like that. So again, round up every time for this. So remember, why you calculate the tact time? So you know how many workers you need. So volume, this is the biggest thing, volume. Standardized in supplies. We have to make sure there's enough, that the volume and demand are high enough, or that you can produce things, that there's a high demand needed, and as you produce that volume, you need to make sure it's standardized, and that you have the supplies available. It's going to produce low cost per unit, you're going to get through a lot of things. It's nice because you can do things with a lot of quality control. This is a big one here. Anytime work stops, it causes a big problem. Because a lot of these places, these assembly lines, or production lines, once you shut them down, it takes time to restart them. It's not just a lost time to produce something, it's that startup time. And again, this is the McDonald's assembly line. Orders through here, and this just looks familiar. So what we talked about last week with the process maps, going through here. It has the elapsed time up here, past time, and the past. So I'm going to introduce the idea of assembly line, then the activity for Thursday is shorter. Bring headphones. The activity for Thursday, you're going to watch some videos and you discuss as a group what's in those videos. So bring headphones as a group, or each individual, or you can watch the lower body part. So we'll introduce them and revisit this on Thursday. We'll take some time on Thursday to really go into detail. But I want to talk about it now just so we can start on board and get an idea, because this can be confusing. So you're minimizing the imbalance between the teams of personnel. Imbalance means you're making sure you have enough people in the machines in the right place. You're also putting together machines and people in such a way that you can shorten the time to reduce material. It's all about getting things done shorter and faster. Assembly line, as fast as possible. So takt time, we talk about workers needed. Takt time, workers required, and cycle time. You should be able to calculate these without Excel or template for this. You should be able to calculate these by hand or with an Excel spreadsheet. So you notice on the Excel spreadsheets that you have, you can always scroll to the right and work in that space or create a new tab. Just if you're used to working in Excel, work through fine, no problem. But production time is critical that you know this. Because this is takt time and production time, or what operations managers in the manufacturing setting, it's two key variables. I'm a director of the manufacturing program, and when students come back from interviews, they're constantly saying, oh yeah, we were asked to do tactics, talk about cycle. So it's important to manufacturing. So first, this is production time available. If it is not stated in a problem, write this down. At least someplace not close. It's the 8 hours per day is the production time. That's the default setting. It's not listed anywhere. Go with the 8-hour workday. In reality, people don't work 8 hours. Everybody has lunch breaks. Some unions require to have the 8 hours. They have a half-hour lunch break and then 2 15-minute breaks. Your production time may only be 7 hours. And of that 7 hours, you may subtract another 20 minutes, but 10 minutes before and after a shift, where there's that time for people to change over. So it may not be perfectly set. So, but an ideal scenario is going to be 8 hours. If it's not stated within 4 to 8 minutes, and the desired output comes from what the customer wants. You have used 120 leads per day, or else the customer not going to be happy. And the problem is that your boss is not going to be happy, and you're never going to get your swimming pool Christmas song. So, it's easy. You put the production time divided by that, 4 minutes per unit. Again, look at this. This is a common mistake. Write this down in a permanent marker on top of your notes. Do not do unit per minute. That is wrong. That will get you maybe a third of a point, a third credit, if not 0. It's minutes per unit. Write that down. Make sure you put in your Excel spreadsheet and you put in units again. The reason this is important because the rest of this simulation, this is all done Excel in. The cycle time, another really key term. This is the fourth one I told you is like a key, very critical manufacturing. Know it. Write it down and you put it back. The cycle time is the max time spent at any station. When you're putting together a hamburger, it takes longer for it to cook than it does to slap the toppings on and stuff on it, a little heavy. So you cannot go any faster than the slowest step in any process. I did track in high school, and there are times that I missed faster than me. So I have more ability to adjust. And that's important for the distance where guys are going cross country, like little digs in the but the key thing is, the cycle time here is 7 minutes. You do not add anything. Provide anything with this. You just simply look at this. I can give you the quiz question. I gave you this and a thing. Which one of these is cycle time? 7, 5, or none of the above? Or all of these? So, Thursday, so it's see how it's back in. And with that, head coach on Thursday.